as a great opportunity brilliantly disguised as an impossible situation. And you have to match the conditions in your environment with a new mind. Now we're talking about greatness, because innovation and creativity and a new way of thinking and a new way of being means that we can't do the same thing from the past. And so in history, cultures that, or individuals that overcame their environmental conditions were considered mystics and saints and leaders and charismatic leaders. They were individuals that saw past the illusion of the present reality. Now, when we begin to become innovative or creative, the brain begins to switch. We begin to turn on the forebrain, the frontal lobe, which is really the crowning achievement of the human being, and we begin to ask bigger questions. How can we create a new way of being in a world that's falling apart? How can we begin to create a new system to adapt to these conditions? Now, the hardest part, without a doubt, in all of my research about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. So reason this. You think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day. Out of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts that you think, 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. So the same thoughts will lead to the same choices. The same choices will lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors will create the same experiences. The same experiences create the same emotions, and those same emotions drive the same thoughts, and that's called a personality. And your biology is a reflection of your state of being. So then your personality is directly related to your personal reality. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So in order for you to create a new personal reality, a new life, then you have to begin to examine the thoughts that you're thinking and decide if you want to continue thinking that way or choose a new way of thinking. You have to become aware and observe your behaviors and look to see if those habits are something that's going to support a new future. And you have to look at the emotions that you've memorized that keep you connected to the past and decide if those emotions are healthy. So most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. We literally have to become somebody else. So it stands to reason then, as you begin to question and speculate possibilities, the Wright brothers, Madame Curie, Thomas Edison, Benjamin Franklin, Marconi, they were all thinking outside the box. They were asking questions. Is there a way to create this outcome? And when they began to think in new and unusual ways, new thoughts lead to new choices. New choices lead to new behaviors. New behaviors lead to new experiences. New experiences create new emotions. And all of a sudden, you start to transform. So, in order to change a culture, you have to change individuals. We have to change it individual by individual. Now, this requires then, by not making the same choices you did the day before, to begin to think and act in different ways. This is the creative function of human beings. So if an economy is collapsing, if a government is deceiving, if people are no longer feeling supported, then we have to think in uncommon ways in order to adapt to the environment. If we don't, then it is really the environment, the external world, that's controlling how we think and feel. We're victims to the external world. Is it possible to change the way you think and feel and have some effect in your environment? Now, that is a concept that when people are struggling to survive becomes very difficult, because you're still worried about the food on your table, you're still worried about the well-being of your children, but what's the alternative? I mean, there aren't many other alternatives. So then when we start asking unlimited questions, questions like, what would be a great way to run a business in this changing world? How could I begin to influence my future? It requires one amazing thing, and that is gaining knowledge, gaining information. Every time you learn something new, you make a new connection in your brain. That's what learning is. And as you begin to think about new ways of being and you're learning new information, the brain begins to fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And whenever you make the brain work differently, you are changing your mind. Mind is the brain in action. So when we begin to get creative, something unusual happens. We stop living by those survival emotions. Those survival emotions alter our perception and cause us to look at the future through the lens of the past. As we begin to design a new way of being, we have to lay down the very thing that we used our whole life to get what we want for something greater to take over. Now we're talking about genius. Now we're talking about innovation. Now once the idea comes, the next step is that you have to take action. You have to do something with it. So for example, a person may say, I lost my job, and they may see it as the worst thing that ever happened to them. But Steve Jobs was fired from Apple. He was on the board and they fired him. And then he created Pixar. And then when he created Pixar, they hired him back onto Apple and Macintosh, and he became the leading executive. So when we have situations in our life, most people are defined by those situations emotionally. It brands them, and they no longer want to move forward. So let's say a person loses their job, and they're confronting difficult conditions. But a person who would say, well, let me look at the world. China is doing very well. I have a little experience in computers. Hey, I have experience in sales. Oh, I know a person who travels back and forth to China. And we start having to think outside the box. So maybe I can begin to leave the present reality that I have and begin to explore new realities. Now, it means that you have to be willing to step into the unknown. It means that you have to step outside the familiar self. So there's this kind of model that says, here's the old self, and here's the new self. And there's a gap between the two. And when we no longer think, act, and feel in the same way, all of a sudden we start to feel uncomfortable. We start to feel unfamiliar. It starts to become unknown to us. And most people, the moment they step outside of the old self, because they're no longer making the same choice, they don't feel like themselves any longer. So the first thing they do is they make the same choices that to produce the same behaviors, that create the same experiences, that produce the same emotions, and they say, this feels comfortable. Well, it feels familiar. The person, the maverick, who's willing to step out into the unknown, that unknown is the perfect place to create from. Because only in the unknown can you create something new. And if you and I can become comfortable in that unknown place, then the best way to predict the future is to create it from that unknown place. Now, when people start crossing the river of change from the old self to the new self, because they're no longer thinking, acting, and feeling in the same way, there is literally a biological, a neurological, a genetic, a chemical death of the old self. And this dark night of the soul, this unfamiliar place, is the true value, the true step towards developing a new self. So then if we're leaving the old and we are creating the new, then the next most important question is, well, if I'm going to create a new self, what thoughts do I want to think? What behaviors can I plan? And as you begin to image and rehearse a new way of being, You're changing your brain and body neurologically and biologically. That's the neuroscientific model of mental rehearsal. And as we begin to remind ourselves who we no longer want to be, and we remind ourselves every day of who we do want to be, there'll come a moment where we begin to silence the circuits in our brain that are connected to the old self and inhibit the chemicals that reaffirm the same identity, and then begin to fire and wire new circuits in our brain that begins to install the neurological hardware that begins to create a level of inspiration where we start seeing new possibilities. We see a new landscape, we see a new horizon. And that person who crosses the river of change then all of a sudden has new opportunities in their life. And they're seeing possibilities that they never saw before. And the doors begin to open in their life. They begin to notice, wow, I'm so glad I got fired from that old job, because I would have never thought of living in China or traveling back and forth to Beijing and selling this product there. I never would have thought of opening a market in South Africa, whatever it is for the person. But they weren't thinking about it as their old self. They only can see it as their new self.
Wow, what a great video. I hope you enjoyed this amazing interview with Dr. Joe Dispenza. We are continuing with our daily practice of completing the inspiring quotes. You need to complete the quote with the words that are missing, and if you can do it first and give us the right answer, you're the daily winner. In the previous video we were looking for 2 words of the Joe Dispenza's quote, and the quote was like this: same thoughts always lead to the same choices, same choices lead to the same behaviors, and the same behaviors lead to, and the correct answer is same experiences. So, same thoughts always lead to the same choices lead to the same behaviors, and the same behaviors lead to the same experiences. Congratulations to everyone with the correct answer. We only had a few wrong answers. Since I know you love Joe Dispenza, today's quote is also from Joe Dispenza. We are looking for 2 words. The quote goes like this: just as thoughts are the language of the brain, feelings are the language of. Write your answers in the comments below the video and tell me if you love this video and our new way of ending the videos. If you like this video, give your thumbs up and share it with your friends. Help me make this video more popular by sharing it. Even if you're not sure what the correct answer is, try and guess. The first one with the correct answer is the winner. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button, and don't miss any of new videos and new challenges. If you really like what we do here and want to support us, you can join our channel and our community for a symbolic fee and gain many other additional features. You can do that by clicking the join button next to the subscribe button, or you can click on the link in the